I feel kind of ill right now. Not like I have like COVID, but I just like don't feel good. But I feel like I start off every episode not feeling good, and then like when I'm getting into the mode, I just I just lock in.
Yeah.
You
It's
mean?
once you get into the swing of it.
No, today you're gonna crash out.
I'm gonna crash out. Marcus's favorite new phrase, crashing out.
I asked Steph her number just so I could text her sis is crashing out.
Did she respond?
I don't think so.
Poetry.
Fellas, we're back here. We're back in the podcasting zone. It is 2025. It is the new year. And, I always feel like this is a good time of year to both look forward and look back. And in this episode, we are going to be doing both of those things in exactly that order. We're going to be looking at the year ahead and then going way back in time. This is kind of going to be a special episode. A little bit different than the usual slate. We don't have any celebrity in the crosshairs necessarily. Hollywood is safe from us, at least. We got a bevy of fun things to talk about today. So this is Not Fit for Composition, episode 7, I believe. We're coming up on...
yeah, I think so.
We're coming up on 1 year of this podcast. I hope we can do more than 6 episodes this year, but we'll see. We'll see. We get to it when we get to it. My name is August Smith. I am your host, along with my co-hosts here, Eleanor Eli Moss and Marcus Corey. How's the new year treating you guys?
I am simultaneously a shell of my former self and more powerful than I have ever been.
Okay. Why are you a shell? You've shed a shell and you've emerged like some sort of phoenix, Merlin.
Sure, we can go with that.
Merlin is getting in on the 4th mic on this podcast. What you guys are in up? Oh my God.
He's the producer.
I can hear him purring on you. Marcus, what have you been up to this year?
I don't know. Isn't it like only 2 weeks into the year?
That's 2 weeks of content that we can mine from your life. You've been sick. You've been working a lot. You've been recording music. What have you been doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just quote my favorite musician, Fred Thomas. This could be the year. I'll leave it at that.
This could be the year. Absolutely. It could be the year for a lot of things. I'm feeling good. I had a good New Year's Eve. Eleanor, we went to a party last week. We've been partying. You stayed there like 5 hours later than me. Someone gave you a rose. You're gonna have to start bringing me to.
Someone else threw it into the fire.
Yeah, someone gave you a rose. Someone else threw it into the fire. There's some sort of lovers' quarrel going on. I've been dragging you out to parties. You're gonna have to start dragging me to parties. You're taking my place. You're becoming the social dynamo of our duo.
I don't know where to find any of the parties, though. That's what you're for.
No, that's me. That's what I do. Well, finder's fee. You got to start paying me for every party. $50. No, no, it's been a good year for all of us so far, I feel like. I mean, it's just getting started. We had like 3 days of a full moon. Did you guys notice that?
No, I don't go outside, or when I do, I don't care. I don't care.
You don't go up and gaze at the moon?
No. I mean, this is a detour, but like, yeah, I don't go outside. It's like the edgiest thing I can say, but also because I've done like more outdoorsy things than any outdoorsy people will ever do. So I can just say I climb that hill. It's lame. I don't like the sun or the moon. I wear my headphones outside and I don't want to look at the natural world.
You live like right by a cool park. Like, I took a nap in that park when I visited you last. You don't hang out there? There's like families, there's
I'd rather-
dogs.
As if I like either of those things. I'd rather just. I like the dog on the cover of Eleanor's collection of poems, so I'd rather be reading that.
Okay, fair. Well, okay, so here's what we're doing with this episode. First, I have collected a bevy, a wide selection of literary predictions for the new year. I hit up people across the literary world that I have connections to. I hit up some people that are very established and famous poets. I hit up other indie online poets. I hit up another podcaster. We've got a whole selection of predictions for the new year, and we're going to go through these in a little segment I like to call Project 2025. Let's start with our last guest, Steff Yue Duhem, who, by the way, everyone is like, she should be the fourth mic on the podcast.
Including me.
I mean, I don't disagree. But
I don't disagree. Yeah. But what?
Never mind.
Well, I had pitched it to her, and her response was basically, "I don't know if I want to read that much bad poetry." So, which is very, very realistic. I feel like I'm assigning homework to you guys.
Yeah, that's so valid. No. Okay, I'll just backtrack. What I was going to say isn't anything that I haven't said to her. Just being like, oh, but I don't want like monthly performance of toxic femininity. Like I like the three of us is a nice comfort zone, but go on.
Yeah, you know what? I'm sure Steff will make more appearances this year, but her prediction goes thusly. She says, I think we're going to see more writing that leans away from screens. Minimal references to the internet, scrolling, and phones. People are sick of the, quote, online voice, and remarking on technological alienation is beginning to seem kind of tired. Well, Steff, I personally would love to see this prediction come true. As someone who maybe kind of overdosed on some of that type of stuff in the early 2010s, I think it's been played out. What do you guys think?
I mean, I guess I wouldn't mind that kind of thing, but yeah, I don't necessarily need it.
Yeah,
do people still do it?
I guess so. I mean, definitely, I can think of books from the past year or two where that people are still commenting on the nature of being so online. It's like, how much more can we get out of that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm over it.
Yeah. I feel like when I was like 20, I was like, oh my God, you can write poems about selfies and Facebook and stuff. And that felt like a revelation a little bit, but
I do anticipate there's going to be a lot of references to TikTok in upcoming poems this year.
Yeah. It'll be like elegies for TikTok's death, perhaps.
Yeah, probably.
I'd like that. That's a pretty good prediction. Okay, well, Steff, thank you for the prediction. Tao Lin, not one to miss a chance to do some self-promotion, sent in this prediction. New book possibly by me, titled Reasons to Live. So, you know, I guess there's your little commercial, Tao. Kind of phoned that one in. But, okay, we can look forward to a new Tao Lin book if that's your kind of thing.
I mean, it is a literary prediction.
Yeah, I guess so.
To keep it brief, like I guess the majority of what he does or what he says makes me laugh either intentionally or unintentionally. So like whatever, something he puts out, it can't be that bad. I mean, and even if it's bad, it's gonna be. I'm gonna find it funny, even if he didn't. Even if he didn't want it to be funny. Yeah.
This next one comes in from Jill McDonough.
Classic.
Jill is she's a great poet, one of my former professors at UMass Boston, writer of such books as Habeas Corpus, Reaper, her book about drone pilots and drone warfare, and most recently, I think American Treasure. A lot of her books come out through Alice James, a fantastic poet. If you've never read Jill McDonough, and her prediction is, all caps, "This is the year you will read something that will change your life again." Nice. Okay. Do you think that'll happen to you guys this year?
I hope so.
Maybe. I'm not gonna hold my breath, but maybe.
Okay, but don't you think everything you read changes your life? Every word you read in some way moves a little atom inside your brain.
I love being like
Okay, nerd.
not the most pessimistic person in like a trio. It's crazy, like statistically. Statistically, it's insane. But I'm open to it. I'm hoping for it. Yeah.
Oh my god, it is funny. I think about it how for my two co-hosts are like the two like the two misanthropic people of my life. Next, we have this was one that you requested. I reach out for Eleanor. This is Rachelle Toarmino of
Lo-Fi Lit.
She made an appearance on Lo-Fi Lit for sure. Rachelle Toarmino, who is of Peach Mag and Beauty School, the sort of independent internet workshop based school, really. She predicts this. She says, "I foresee gift cards for Submittable, which is the platform people submit to things on. A poetry book by Ethel Cain, which we would cover on the podcast if that happened. I think that's a pretty good prediction. Joyce Carol Oates quote dragging Margaret Atwood on X. Okay. I could see it happening. I would love that. Poems modernizing the movie that's coming out of the Odyssey, followed by classicism discourse, which I think we just had. I think she's just saying that we'll talk about that again, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But then she says, in all seriousness, I think we'll see more poets/writers and small presses/journals offer independent workshops, which does seem to be a growing model as far as trying to make a living as a writer and a poet. I know a lot of people who take these workshops. And what do you guys think? Do you see a trend towards more independent workshops?
Oh yeah, there's already been skyrocketing.
So many. The next one comes.
I do also agree about the. I agree about the Ethel Cain poetry book. We're about due for one.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense.
Especially after the album she just released.
I haven't listened to it yet, but I heard it's like drone music, which is cool.
It's like drone / ambient. It's really good. Kind of reminds me of Grouper.
Oh, damn.
Bro.
Oh, that's a
Oh, no.
great sell. No. You don't think so, Marcus?
I'll let cooler heads prevail and bite my tongue.
You just don't. I mean, you just are a groupie. You don't want.
Yeah. I don't know. Ethel Cain. It's like I'm trying to think of.
She had one album that was like kind of like alt country, but
isn't she like isn't she a member of like who's that like trio of women who make bad music?
You're thinking of Boy Genius. You're thinking of Phoebe Bridgers.
That all sounds the same to me.
Yeah. Okay,
it is the same, and like. Okay, I know enough. Like, I don't know. I'm musically competent enough to say, like, yeah, that stuff all sounds the same. I listened to like 2 tracks of that, and I'm not even a like fan, obviously. And I just thought, I was like, oh, this is boring. But she's like famous, and isn't she a member of Boy Genius?
Ethel Cain is not in Boy Genius.
Okay.
Not yet, anyway.
I see where you're going with this, but I think you're just mixing together indie singer-songwriter women in your head and
green text indie.
Okay, fair. Well, if she does come out with a book, we'll cover it, and then we can listen to this possibly grouper album. The next prediction comes from Matthew Rohrer, one of my favorite poets, author of most recently Army of Giants, which came out through Wave. Also author of Surrounded by Friends, one of my very favorite poetry books. The Others, really great verse novel. he predicts in 2025, the new administration will sell the Library of Congress to Wawa, and instead of a poet laureate, they'll appoint a flavored creamer. It's just not clear what flavor. Now, I think we can all agree that the Wawa hazelnut creamer has put in the work, and we all enjoyed the piece of writing that the Wawa hazelnut creamer published in the Paris Review. So I think we can all at least pull for that. Your thoughts?
Honestly, an inaugural creamer would be more enjoyable than an inaugural poet.
Inaugural creamer. I don't even know what that would be like. It would just sit on the dais in a little cup, maybe. It'd be kind of surreal. Next, we have, I wanted to get some predictions from outside our little poetry corner. And so I reached out to a friend of both Eleanor and mine named Kit Rosewater. Kit writes young adult, middle grade, and children's books. She used to live here in Austin. Now she lives in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And just a friend of the pod. Shout out to Kit. I like her prediction a lot. She says, a prediction for the young adult romantasy world. I was new to this word, romantasy, but I think we can all know what that means. She says, I feel like it's always bouncing back and forth between vampiric love interests and werewolf-inspired or generally, quote, beast-like love interests. And we're always watching the volley, and that's fine. That's fun, I guess. But why not shake things up more? Prediction for 2025 is we get to see more hot zombie love interests hitting the scene. I want to see tall, decomposing, and handsome. I want to see skin that's so soft it fucking falls off the bone. I want to see more bone in the boning. You get the picture. So, zombie romances, thoughts on this prospect?
I mean, might as well.
Do young adult books have a lot of fucking in them? Is that the vibe I'm getting?
I mean, romantasy isn't necessarily young adult. It's
I see.
Mostly adult, honestly. There's some young adult stuff, but a lot of romantasy is adult and mature, quote unquote.
I guess that makes sense. I can't think of any time I've ever thought of zombies having love interests. It seems sort of antithetical to the zombie nature, but perhaps I'm wrong.
Yeah, but if it gets into a popular book, then, I mean, I could see it, honestly. There's a lot of monster fuckers around.
Yeah, honestly, I would like to see it. I like how she's like, the prediction, she's kind of like, we're always seeing werewolf and beast love interests. I'm like, this is news to me, too. I didn't know this was like a thing. The next one comes from Jane Greer.
Yes.
Longtime fans of the pod will remember Jane Greer as the Twitter formalist poet who started erasure poetry discourse and sonnet poetry discourse, sort of igniting, over the course of a year, igniting two massive shitstorms of people talking about forms and poetry on Twitter. We're big fans of Jane Greer. She says, I'm no good at predicting. My great hope is that writers and non-writers will become more aware of and protective of the truth and will stop contorting language for political purposes. I'm not seeing that happening anytime soon, Jane. I'm sorry.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah.
You can keep hoping.
Yeah.
But
unfortunately, language is political by its very nature. So, good luck with do that.
I respect the commitment to the cause, the belief. I respect the conviction. Yeah,
absolutely. Shout out to Jane Greer. Keep the discourse coming, girl. Next, we got Chelsey Minnis. Who you told us to reach out to, Eleanor. But Chelsey Minnis said, thank you for this email. And I'm using this tone because there's tons of exclamation points. I'm grateful for your support, but so sorry to say I wouldn't dare to make any literary predictions. I honestly don't think I would make any predictions about anything in the world, but I promise if I think of even one prediction of any kind, I will let you know. 3 exclamation points. Even if it's months from now, I will keep you in mind, and if I catch myself saying anything predictive, I will report it to you! 4 exclamation points. So, I didn't really say, this is Chelsey Minnis, one of the best poets that we got going right now. Huge fan. Poemland.
One of my faves.
Yeah, the only book that I can pull from my memory right away is Poemland.
And Baby I Don't Care is her
Oh,
most recent.
Baby, I Don't Care. That's a great book too. I think was that out on Wave? I think that was also on Wave.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful book. Shout out to Chelsey Minnis. We'll be waiting the minute you send us anything predictive. It's going on the pod, so thank you. I also reached out to Catch Breath, who is the organizer of much online poetry things, events, festivals, this kind of thing. And I have a sad prediction from Catch Breath this year. She says, no reunion poetry fest this year. Slanting sad face. So perhaps there's no big poetry festival as the one that I attended this past year. But, you know.
That is sad.
That is sad. I know we were talking about maybe going together, Eleanor, this year. So hopefully we find a reason to go to Philly anyway.
I will.
Yeah, maybe we can do a reading there anyway. That would be fun. But
Probably.
honestly, Catch Breath has earned a break. Catch Breath should be able to catch their breath,
Truly.
basically.
Yes.
Now we got Tyler from Lo-Fi Lit. As we mentioned earlier, Lo-Fi Lit is the preeminent indie online literature interview podcast. A beguiling and strange individual with some of the best interviews ever. He says, my prediction is 4 to 5 indie literary podcasts will join together and create one big literary podcast channel. Then infighting and cliques will implode it in less than 2 months. So what do we think of that? Would we join this channel as our, would we be a part of this? Would we cause the explosion?
I mean, you might cause the explosion. I doubt I will.
Yeah, I'm a messy bitch sometimes. It's true. Marcus, what do you think of Tyler's prediction as a fan of Tyler's work?
I mean, it'd be possible with some effort, but I would delegate all of that effort to you. And I could make a comment or two, I'm sure, that could serve as either the flint or tinder to ignite something, but I don't know if
I would
I'd
fan
take
those flames.
if I would take the initiative to join such a collective.
I just don't think we're diligent enough with the podcast. We're so fucking sloppy with it. Like we're not like,
Yeah.
like I don't want other people relying on it besides the people who already listen to the podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But whatever. It's a labor of love. And finally, I reached out to another one of my professors, Pulitzer Prize winner in music journalism and Elizabeth Bishop acolyte, Lloyd Schwartz, a fantastic poet. One of the people I learned very much learned a lot from, Jesus Christ, when I went to school. One of the most pleasant individuals I've ever met in my life. And he says, I asked for one prediction and he gave me 11, so I'll rip through them.
Wow.
He says, well, I'm not much of a fortune teller, but here are some predictions. 1, there will be more poetry books than ever published in 2025. 2, most of them will be published by small presses. 3, the names of the small presses will be cuter than ever. 4, more poetry books than ever will be ignored by people outside the poetry world. 5, more poetry books than ever will be ignored by people inside the poetry world. 6, more poetry books than ever will have poems printed in a typeface too small to read. 7, more back covers of poetry books will have blurbs printed in a color that makes it invisible against the color of the back cover itself. 8, there will be, as every year, some exceptional poetry books that we hope our friends will tell us about because these books will not be reviewed in the major newspapers or magazines. 9, some poets will get prizes that will make other poets scream. 10, all good poets will continue to work as hard as possible to make their poems better and better. And then he followed that up with one more. At least one poet will be either accepted or rejected by a periodical to which they did not submit work. And then he followed me up with another email and said, by the way, all of these predictions come true every year. So, very aspirational, very sweet. What do you guys think of Lloyd's predictions?
I mean, right on the money.
Right on the money.
I think it's maybe inspiring, but also grim. his comments or his forecasting regarding all the poems that'll be ignored by people that actually do read poetry.
Yes, more poetry books than ever will be ignored by people inside the poetry world.
Yeah.
But I guess that comes part and parcel with there just being more books than ever. Like if there's more books, then more will be ignored. He's just doing a math problem there, maybe. But we love you, Lloyd Schwartz. Thank you so much for these predictions coming in. And then one more, we got a literary prediction from Neil Gaiman, who says... I'm just kidding. I should probably cut that.
Jesus.
Probably.
Those are the predictions. I think we got a nice spread here. It looks like a positive vibe across the board. 2025 is looking good. Changes coming through. Possible fighting, but that's always the case. And poetry will probably continue to grow. What do you guys think?
I predict that Penguin Random House will evolve into a sentient gestalt entity and begin to subsume all literary works into one gigantic mass.
Okay. Via AI, no doubt.
Yeah, probably.
I do feel like we'll probably see like AI, like more works commenting on AI this year. I think that's kind of inevitable.
I hate that.
Yeah,
I hate the process.
I hate be a larger problem this year.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Marcus?
I hate the prospect of even. Yeah, I hate any of that discourse. I just find it all just without any resolution and extremely annoying and unproductive, like just purely unproductive in so many ways.
Absolutely unproductive. Yeah. Both a combination of like unbelievable idealism about what it can do and then like just the most rank doomerism possible. And like probably both are correct in some ways, but I don't know. That's for people smarter than me to figure out. Do you guys feel that way?
Yeah, I just mostly try to ignore it.
There was something that came out. Oh, we were talking about this, Eleanor, but there's something that came out about like a test where it was like a bunch of AI generated poems and then a bunch of contemporary poems, and people gravitated towards the AI poems. And I don't give a fuck. Fuck that. Who cares? Duh. People like bad poems. This is not new.
No, there's a whole industry based off of bad poetry.
Yeah, we're fucking leeching on it. This whole podcast. Everyone we've read has more readers than us.
Yeah, way more.
Yeah. What about you, Marcus? Any predictions for the new year?
Does it have to be poetry or can it be like literature?
You can go as wide as you want with it.
Okay, let's just say literature, and I actually only formulated this this prediction since we've begun recording this episode. I think that I don't know how to describe it, and I can't cite a work, but like the very garish, like lots of yellows and bright swirls of novels from like in contemporary literary fiction that we've seen in the past couple years.
As far as like cover art goes?
Yeah, cover art. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That we'll see a little bit less of that, but there'll be something new and more terrifying that's gonna like replace it.
I can't even imagine what could be more terrifying than like the current like paradigm of mainstream literary fiction design, which I find unbelievably predictable and like formulaic at this point.
Yeah, I do have another prediction.
Okay, let's hear it. We're just like we're tapping into the fucking oracle right now, so just like let him go, just let it stream, baby.
My prediction is that we're finally going to record our Instagram poetry episode.
Oh, that is gonna happen. That is definitely gonna happen. That is looming on the horizon, like climate change. I think we're going to see, I think there's going to be a weirdly new I think there's going to be a growing push for more formalism in poetry due to like the reactionary turn of culture. But I think the pushback is we're going to see like really exciting, like multimodal, like multilinguistic avant-garde arts sort of come back more to the fore than they have been in the poetry world. I think the MFA voice and the MFA craft is going to start to wear thin, and we'll see both less interesting books and more interesting books, but the extremes are going to ramp up their game. That's my prediction. That's looking forward. But I also want to look back at the past. We're going to do a little history lesson here on this episode because as by the time you're listening to this podcast, I think there's going to be a freaking Cheeto in the White House again. Marcus, I thought I was gonna get a laugh from you out of that one.
I was laughing. I just want to contain myself. Like,
don't contain your laughter.
I thought you were gonna follow up with like Orange Man something.
Orange Man bad. Orange Man bad, but Orange Man back.
Orange Man is back.
Yeah.
Orange Man's back in a big way. We have the inauguration is gonna be on Monday. I hope to get this episode up by then. This had me thinking a lot. Thank you. I think I can do it. But, this had me thinking a lot about the inauguration poets of the past. So for this next section, we are going to be talking about, and at the end, we're going to rank all of the inaugural poets. We're going to just dip into each inaugural poet throughout history, say a little bit about each one. I got a few things to say. We're going to do a little evaluation, a little analysis of their poems, and then we're going to rank them. And then we're going to talk a little bit about who Trump's inaugural poet could be, even though he almost certainly will not have one. So for just like a little context sake, and this is kind of like, here's August's book report part of the podcast. Merlin. Baby cat. Just a little bit of background, a little context for our listeners here. Inauguration poets fall under the mode that would be called occasional poetry. I enjoy the occasional poem myself, but an occasional poetry. Occasional poetry obviously is poems about occasions. Now, it's not really a genre. More of a mode, and it kind of encapsulates many genres, such as the elegy, the funeral dirge, the epithalamium, which is the wedding poem, the victory ode. These are all occasional poems. About occasional poems, Hegel said, poetry's living connection with the real world and its occurrences in public and private affairs is revealed most amply in the so-called pièces d'occasion. If this description were given a wider sense, we could use it as a name for nearly all poetic works. I kind of agree with that. And in a way, all poems are occasional poems. You know what I mean?
Yeah, technically.
But we're talking about specific works composed for specific moments in time. Hegel kind of says, not only is this the moment where poetry kind of approaches its closest sort of connection to the real world. Interestingly enough, like, people want this stuff because the National Endowment for the Arts once did a survey, I think maybe 15 years ago or so, on how the general American populace engages with poetry. And really what they found is that people like poetry at life events, a graduation, a wedding, a funeral, this kind of thing. So for most people, poetry really only exists as occasional poetry, right? Like they see that as like the function. It's sort of the utilitarian function of poetry.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't think about like the technical aspects of poetry. They just see it as something like grand and momentous to mark some kind of occasion.
Sure. And there's something sort of magical and ritualistic about it, right? Like, you're writing a poem and it kind of like can seal the sublime nature of a moment in language, and it kind of like raises the register and kind of gilds it, like, right? Like, oh, a poem is being performed right now at this wedding. This is very beautiful. This is sort of, to me, it seems like a ritual almost, right? It's like not unlike spells or something, right?
Yeah, it is, especially considering there isn't really like any one central like American traditional ritual, or
Sure.
at least not in the sense that a lot of other cultures have. So I feel like poetry is kind of taking the place of that at times.
Yes, and it seems to like slot in when people are feeling their most sort of wistful, sentimental, right? Like these occasions where like we can really feel these emotions. It's like that's when people want to hear poetry. And Ben Lerner actually in his book Hatred of Poetry, he talks about occasional poetry in that book, specifically relevant here. He talks about Obama's inaugural poet. Even more specifically, he talks about a piece of criticism that the announcement of the poet received from George Packer in The New Yorker, who kind of like lamented that poetry had lost its ability to speak to the masses. Lerner says that Packer, quote, mourns the lost unifying power that poetry supposedly formerly had, and that nostalgists hate poems for failing to do what they wrongly, vaguely claim poetry once was or did. Now, you can probably hear it in Lerner's language there, but essentially he's saying, like, people kind of view as though in the past there was a poetry that could speak to the masses and that it has somehow lost this ability. But tellingly, no one is able to really say when in the past that was, you know? Like a lot of people talk about Rome being the time when occasional poetry and poetry had this sort of ability. Some people talk about Walt Whitman being the sort of American bard of the time and that we've lost the ability to speak to the masses, but nobody can really agree on when that was. But Lerner kind of locates a contradiction in the inaugural poem, in the striving for a poet who can, quote, reconcile the individual and the social, and so transform millions of individuals into an authentic people. Now, he kind of says, like, in the American political project, that's impossible, right? Like, there never was and there never will be individual who can take individuated experience and also speak for everyone of the American people. But people want it. People want the inaugural poet. They want the occasional poem. They just never want the one that actually gets chosen. And that's what I find is really interesting. Like people in the sort of idealize like this idea of the inaugural poet, but it's never the one. It's the one that gets chosen is never the one. You know what I mean? And the poems always are highly criticized in the media, except for one of them, and we'll get to that. But there's always this sense it's like, well, this isn't the right poet, but we do respect the inaugural poet. It's just that, you know, poets have lost the ability to speak to the people. There's this interesting tension, and this comes up again and again in my research. So thoughts about this? I mean, did you guys think about any of these topics at all while you were reading these inaugural poems?
Yeah, I was going through your notes a little bit and thinking about it. And I feel like it's a difficult balance to get for an occasional poem.
Yeah.
To like, well, I mean, in a sense, like all the inaugural poets put like a little bit of, you know, a personal touch on their poems.
Of course, yes.
Even if just subtly, but it's hard to portray more individuality when you're like addressing so broad a spectrum.
Sure. It's like, how can they speak for millions when poetry is also this like very personal art form, at least the way it is now. And, you know, in many ways has always been, but it's like the modern lyrical poet is speaking from a place of individual experience, but also they have to speak for all of America. It seems it's a tough, you know what? It gives me a little bit of sympathy for the inaugural poets because that is a tough challenge, I think.
Yes, I only really briefly glanced over your notes like intentionally because I wanted to kind of go into it with a little without too much baggage. And I did read all of them, and what you described is kind of what I had in my was something I was thinking about that was relevant actually to like academic literary criticism, believe it or not, of I don't think this is exclusive to like a single like theoretician or literary historian, but I can't even remember the author or authors. But we're speaking about epigonic forms, like forms that, whether it be genre or poetry form, that are basically outdated, and then like what characterizes then an epigonic form, and how is it approached? And I guess I was reading in the context of like, how is it translated, because something can become like fall out of fashion and come back into fashion, or be out of literary circulation in one place and is still done elsewhere. And the way I was reading these was basically, like you said, like contemporary lyric poets really wrestling with like what is an epigonic form, because there's a lot, like there's an assumed and expected loftiness about it all that is like the domain of that is not the domain of contemporary lyric poetry. And I was trying to think of like who would what kind of writer might be like quote appropriate. And I'm not saying I would want this, but I was thinking like probably like someone who writes play like drama or like opera would seem more appropriate than an actual poet, because you get some of the cringe that we like approach. That is, I mean, I use this term a lot, but some of the like desperately heavy-handed things that we see in several of these poems.
Yeah, epigonal poem. That's really, I mean, yeah, just thinking about the inaugural poem as itself a sort of bygone form, and they're sort of like trying to wrestle it into the future while also contending with their position as like a contemporary lyric poet. It's like an impossible task in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I also agree that like with that in mind, gave me a bit more sympathy for like, say, even if they applied or whatever, and just like the task at hand is I don't know if it's doable.
Yeah, I completely agree that it's basically an impossible ask. And I think you see, I mean, you're getting at the exact tension that I'm talking about. It's like, and the tension that gets like expressed in all of the criticism that comes out after these poor poets subject themselves to this, and they don't apply. As far as I can tell, the president or someone on his staff just like picks the poet and they reach out to them. The first inaugural poet, the person who kind of started this tradition, was Robert Frost. Robert Frost was the first inaugural poet, and it was for Kennedy's inauguration. And I found this one to have some of the most interesting lore behind it and some of the most interesting sort of historical context. The reason why Kennedy picked Robert Frost, I found, was that at some point there was an interview where Robert Frost basically said the next president is going to be a senator from Massachusetts, essentially saying the next president is going to be Kennedy. And this was before Kennedy even started to run for president. So Robert Frost like manifested this shit. So this sort of started a exchange between Robert Frost and Kennedy. They sort of exchanged a few letters. And when Kennedy was elected, he reached out to Robert Frost and said, I would like you to perform this particular poem. Now, I want to do a little bit of background here. I kind of have a soft spot for Robert Frost. I know he's kind of like synonymous with like poet that you read in high school, right? Like The Road Not Taken and that kind of thing. Did you guys have that association?
Yeah, generally.
Not. I only have since you referred to him as you referenced him as like some kind of like you referenced him as a reference point, and before that I don't know if I conceived of him as that, but now I do.
I feel like everyone, like, he's sort of like one of the last canonical American poets, and he gets read and analyze. Like The Road Not Taken is such an easy,
Yeah.
quote unquote, easy to analyze poem. So I feel like he has that association. But like I've read some of his deep cuts, and like there's some sublime work there. And an interesting thing about Robert Frost that I didn't know until I was researching this episode was that he was like buddies with Ezra Pound, and he's like, you don't really think about him as a modernist, but he was a
No.
modernist. Like he 100% was contemporaneous with the modernists. He kind of wasn't their vibe. You don't think, when you think of modernism, you think Pound, you think Eliot, you think William Krauss Williams, Wallace Stevens, whatever, Marianne Moore, maybe Gertrude Stein. But you don't think of Robert Frost, but he really is a modernist because he's talking to contemporary anxieties a lot of the time. He's just using more traditional forms. Part of my soft spot for Robert Frost comes from like personal background. And someone recently asked me like what my origin story is with regards to poetry. And I thought way back. And I remembered when I was a child, my older brother, Frankie, had a Robert Frost poem memorized. It was Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. And I'm talking real young, where like maybe I'm like 6 and he's 7. And, my mom must have helped him memorize this poem or something. But he would always be asked to read this poem at family gatherings, at Christmas, at whatever. The adults would be drinking wine, my grandma and my aunts and uncles, and they'd say, "Oh, Frankie, recite this cute little poem." And I was always so jealous of his poem. Because
I did not know this, and I like should.
This is deep Smith lore, and I don't think about it very much. But when I think about the moment in my life when I sort of realized poetry had this like power and sway over people, I think about this. I was really jealous of Frank having this poem memorized, and he was asked to recite it, and the room would go quiet, and he would recite this beautiful poem, and it would always take me on this sort of mental journey, and so Robert Frost has always held a special sort of position in my head. This is all to say that when Kennedy asked Robert Frost to read, he asked Frost to read a specific poem, and he on the inauguration day, and there's a video of this that you can find on YouTube, and I find a rather charming video because Robert Frost wrote a poem specifically for inauguration. He was going to read this new composition. He was going to read an occasional poem for the inauguration, and then he was going to read the poem that Kennedy requested. And so he had typewritten it the night before. He was kind of working on it, and he gets up there, and he's 86 years old, I think, and he starts to read this new poem. And he's struggling through it, and he's sort of, he's squinting at the page. And what's happening is that the sun is reflecting off the snow so brightly that in his old age, he can't read his pages. And so he gets through 6 or 7 lines of the poem, and there's some awkward applause because people think he's maybe done. And then he kind of stops. And then he recites the poem that Kennedy requested, which is a poem called The Gift Outright.
The land was ours before we were the land. She was our land more than 100 years before we were her people. She was ours in Massachusetts and Virginia, but we were England, still colonial, possessing what we still were unpossessed by what we now no more possess. Something we were withholding made us weak until we found out that it was ourselves we were withholding from our land of living, and forthwith found salvation in surrender. Such as we were, we gave ourselves outright, the deed of gift with many deeds of war, to the land vaguely realizing westward, but still unstoried, artless, unenhanced, such as she was, such as she would become, has become, and for this occasion, let me change that to what she will become.
I like the structure and some of the phrasing in it, but I also don't think it's super particularly interesting, not to me at least.
Yeah, it feels just like a little history lesson. It feels So my first read of this was like, this is so colonial. This land was ours before we were the lands. It's kind of like
Yeah.
Manifest Destiny or
Mhm.
something.
Yeah. And I think that it was like not necessarily endorsing that mentality, but like maybe that's like part of the weakness of the poem is that it doesn't really like comment very well on it.
That's kind of an odd choice of a poem. Formally, it's blank verse. It's, I think, 10 syllables per line, but there's not a lot of rhyme going on.
I also thought it was just kind of bland. Positive points. There are some just in the sense of pure sound that I liked. That
Mhm.
I thought, oh, this is an accomplished writer with an ear for the rhythm and cadence in what he's saying, but thematically kind of dull. And I don't know. I obviously I'm aware of mid 20th century history and the zeitgeist thereof, but it doesn't seem super appropriate for Kennedy because I thought that Kennedy was supposed to be some kind of unpopular conception, some kind of uh breath of fresh air, some kind of
Right.
like he wasn't even an Anglo, and like Kennedy was literally Irish, and people cared. Like people were either felt positively or negatively about the fact that this dude was Irish.
Like that meant
And-
something back then
yeah,
in a way that it
meant
doesn't now.
Yeah, it meant something then, and also I don't know. There was obviously mass industrialization and globalization that was like penetrating the lives of every man.
Mhm.
And like none of that appears like in Robert. I mean, sure, it is in blank verse, but there's like nothing thematically that really struck me as, oh wow, this makes sense, or at least seemed appropriate.
Yeah, you point something out that I didn't really notice, but like all the other inauguration poems are so like looking forward. It's a new age. We're going to come together as Americans, and this one doesn't do that at all. This one really looks back, and in a way is, and I'll get to this in a minute, but it kind of doesn't have a very positive outlook for America
Yeah.
at the end.
Well, I feel like it's vague. And I think that's why, ironically, this poem works better than a lot of the other ones at being an occasional poem.
It's not
Because-
trying so hard.
No, it's vague enough and it's formal enough that it lends itself to like the general, image of the poem to, dedicate this commemorative event. And even though it's not really saying all that much and what it is saying is kind of shitty,
Yeah.
I feel like it's what most people would think of when they think of an occasional poem, like something like this.
Right. In some ways, he, quote, understood the assignment. Right. But like,
Yeah. But also, this isn't even the one he wrote for the thing.
I
He
know.
wrote it before that.
And the undelivered one that he wrote is like not, I it's just not a particularly good poem. It's called For John F. Kennedy's Inauguration. And
Yeah, it's not even really a poem. It's more just like an address.
yeah, you know what, you're right. It's almost like almost like more like oration, qua oration than it is a poem. It's rhyming in this really silly way. I'll read the first few lines that he got through. He says,
summoning artists to participate in the august occasions of the state seems something for us all to celebrate. And today is for my cause a day of days. And his be poetry's old-fashioned phrase, who was the first to think of such a thing. This tribute to be his that here I bring is about... No, I'm not having a good life here, sorry. Is about the new order of the ages. I can't see on this side. Is about the new order of the ages that God, that in their Latin, our founding sages, God gave us his approval of.
And it just keeps going like that, and that feels so wrong for like for all the sort of like embedded colonialism of the gift outright. It like feels more appropriate than this sort of like
yeah. It feels appropriate for the occasion.
Yeah. And so I was kind of chewing on this idea of it's like, is this American exceptionalism? Is this like sort of settler colonialism? And I think there is a little bit of that in there. But I found a literary critic named Merritt MacArthur, and she kind of wrote an interesting analysis where she says, especially in the last 5 lines of the gift outright, which is sort of where it gets a little harder to read and a little stranger. Such as we were, we gave ourselves outright. The deed of gift was many deeds of war. To the land vaguely realizing westward, but still unstoried, artless, unenhanced. Such as she was, such as she would become. And here she says, here Frost employs such in the critical or apologetic sense noted in the Oxford English Dictionary, used chiefly with a deprecatory or contemptuous reference. The speaker implies that early Americans were not a great people, nor would their descendants become so. In 1935, amid the slow recovery from the Depression, when Frost wrote the poem, he did not seem to think that America had achieved greatness. We can sense contempt in the line, such as she would become. So I think that's a little lost on us as contemporary readers, because I don't think we use such in that way anymore, in this sort of negative sense. But there is a sort of admonishment embedded in this poem, I think, that we don't really hear quite as loudly as they might have heard back then.
It seems more implied than straight out said to me.
Of course, yeah, it's subtle.
But yeah, the difference in vernaculars does have an effect.
Yeah, especially because he wrote this in the 30s, so it's like they were hearing it in the 50s. He wrote it in the 30s. We're looking at it now. There's got to be like shades to the language that we're kind of missing out on, and I found that kind of interesting.
I don't think he fails the assignment necessarily.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, he struggles because he's old, but
like that's kind of
like,
charming in a way too. Like I like that video where he like can't get through his own poem. It's
he eventually just gets fed up and just like, okay, here's the poem.
That's kind of awesome.
But yeah, I think it's just, for me, it's not a particularly interesting poem, but like it still gets the job done.
So moving on to the second inauguration poet, long break of 30 years until we get back to this this tradition. And we have Maya Angelou, the GOAT, reading for Clinton's inauguration. She wrote a beautiful poem called "On the Pulse of Morning."
A rock, a river, a tree, hosts to species long since departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur, who left dry tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. But today, the rock cries out to us, clearly, forcefully, "Come, you may stand upon my back and face your distant destiny, but seek no haven in my shadow. I will give you no hiding place down here. You, created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain
I
too
love it.
long
I think it's the
face
only
down
one
in
that actually
ignorance.
manages
Your
to
mouths spilling
overcome
words, arms
the
for slaughter.
struggles of the
The
occasional
rock
poem.
cries out to us today,
Say more.
you may
Why do you feel
stand
that way? I mean, besides the obvious skill and beauty on the face of the poem.
across the wall of the
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously he's a good writer, but
Yeah.
this poem specifically is the only one that of the inaugural poets that takes, like, in reading the poem, she's taking the role of the storyteller, and that's not something any of the other poems do. And what better way to address an audience than as a storyteller? And I think it works really well. I mean, first because it's a well-written poem, and second because she's fucking Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
And she states, like, you in that video that you linked, she states that the origins of the poem came from, like, an old gospel song.
Right.
And she's kind of taking that and weaving the kind of folktale into a poem, and I think it just works so well.
Man, I really like this analysis about it being a storyteller, because she's like starting with like the beginnings of the fucking world or something. It's like there's dinosaurs
Basically.
and shit. Yeah.
It does similar things to the other poems, in that it addresses kind of this broad spectrum of existence, but from the perspective of basically like a folktale.
Yeah. That's a really good read. Marcus, what did you think of this one?
I liked it the most out of all of them, and it is relevant and related to what Eleanor just said, but I guess I liked it and thought it was well executed because the breadth, I guess, in the theme, the thematic breadth of it was actually done well, where all of the references that are really suggesting whether it be like history and like origins of people and whatever, American history in general, it's never struck me as being just like corny, where I would contrast that with the Richard Blanco, where I thought that was just like failing hard at what this poem actually does in like addressing the themes that are relevant to the United States of America.
There's something that comes up in a lot of these inauguration poems where they like start doing these listing thing, right? Like trying to bring as many peoples and as many names and as many like various populations into the poem as possible.
Yeah.
But I think she does it. She goes further than everyone, and she does it the best, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, definitely.
Like you can feel the striving to speak for like a massive and like pluralistic populace or something.
But she does it very, very well.
Yeah.
And like addresses a lot of very important things without coming off as like overly preachy or anything, and then still manages to be like optimistic about the future, and like it's just brilliant.
Yeah, it's really good. And I mean, I probably quite literally preaching to the choir here, but she can read a poem so well. she's
Yeah,
an unbelievably good reader.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
She's so cool. The interview where she's like did an interview on Charlie Rose about this, and she's just like hilarious and funny and profound. Like she's that old style of just like public intellectual writer poet that like we just don't have anymore. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Yeah, I strive to be anywhere near that intelligent or like skilled at speaking.
Yeah, absolutely. I love when she's talking to Charlie Rose and she's like, yeah, like for weeks before, people are coming up to me at the supermarket being like, hey, did you finish that poem?
Yeah.
That was cute.
Which I imagine must be fucking wild.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially being born in the time period she was born in.
Yeah.
I bet, her life had to have changed a fucking lot over the years.
Yeah, talk about
to
a head
get to that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's just, it's really cool.
And she grew up 25 miles from where Clinton grew up, so there's like a sort of connection there. Moving on to the third inaugural poet, Clinton's second inauguration, his second term. We have this poet Miller Williams, who's the father of Lucinda Williams, which I thought was kind of interesting, and maybe is the only interesting thing I can say about this poet or this guy. I'll just read from the beginning of History and Hope.
We have memorized America, how it was born, and who we have been, and where. In ceremonies and silence, we say the words, telling the stories, singing the old songs. We like the places they take us. Mostly we do. The great and all the anonymous dead are there. We know the sound of all the sounds we brought. The rich taste of it is on our tongues. But where are we going to be? And why? And who? The disenfranchised dead want to know.
This poem is so fucking boring.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I could say more, but how much more can you say about a boring poem,
Yeah, I mean, it's not even that it's bad. It's just so uninteresting.
Yeah, the most interesting part I thought was bramble.
Bramble.
Like a reference to a bramble was probably the most interesting, like in terms of acoustics or like imagery. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that sticks out to me, and that's about it.
It's a beautiful
It's a
word.
good word.
Yeah. Yeah, Miller Williams seemed to be this sort of bucolic Arkansas poet. And I even found interviews with him and where they asked him about the inaugural poet, and he was just kind of like, yeah, I was happy to do it, and I hope people liked it. Like, he didn't.
Maybe I'm wrong, but he seems like kind of like a more humble person and like
Yes.
not really full of himself.
Sure.
So he's just basically like, okay, here's a poem. Cool.
Totally. I think that's a sweet read of him. I don't want to be negative because it's not a bad poem. It just doesn't leave much of an impression.
Yeah.
There's an interesting component of like invoking the anonymous dead, and I thought that was kind of had some poignancy to me.
I do like the line, like, cannot let ignorance spread itself like rot. I feel like that's applicable.
Yeah, there's some good rhymes going on. We know what we have done and what we have said, and how we have grown degree by slow degree.
Actually, that is something like like sometimes rhyming poems get on my nerves, but I feel like this one is well done.
Yeah, he's got a subtle hand with the rhymes in this one. Moving on to the fourth inaugural poet, you'll notice that all of the inauguration poets are for Democrat presidents. I don't think that's particularly surprising, but it's like weird a single Republican hasn't been like, yo, let me grab one. Like they just don't give a shit.
They really don't.
So next we have Obama's inauguration poets. And the first one was Elizabeth Alexander reading a praise song for the day.
Each day we go about our business, walking past each other, catching each other's eyes or not, about to speak or speaking. All about us is noise. All about us is noise and bramble, thorn and din, each one of our ancestors on our tongues. Someone is stitching up a hem, darning a hole in a uniform, patching a tire, repairing the things in need of repair. Someone is trying to make music somewhere with a pair of wooden spoons on an oil drum, with cello, boombox, harmonica, voice. A woman and her son wait for the bus. A farmer considers the changing sky. A teacher says, Take out your pencils. Begin.
That's,
We encounter
kind of wish it just
each
ended
other in
there
words.
a little bit. Can you
Honestly,
imagine?
that's probably that's a great place to end.
Like after that point, it starts to like go much wider and go more abstract, and it becomes a bit
Yeah,
more about
and-
the we.
Gets a lot cheesier.
Yes, love beyond, love that casts a widening pool of light, all this stuff. But like, I kind of like that opening. Now that I look at it again, it's a very lyric poet, individuated sort of. I'm looking around and sort of taking in the world around me moment. What did you overall think of this poem?
I can't really describe how, but basically, like, I feel like Richard Blanco does this exact same poem, but better.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I don't know in what sense exactly it's better. But this just feels kind of, I don't know. It's cheesy and it's like
It's a little,
that much.
It really feels like it came out of the Academy. Like, I don't know exactly how to pinpoint this, but this feels like the first poem of the bunch that came out of a writing program. And I think she went to Yale, I think she is a sort of Academy poet in a lot of ways. But just the way it's structured in these like tercets, I don't know, it feels like a modern MFA poem or something.
That's
So
it
does.
What, Marcus?
That's so damning.
I don't even mean that like a negative way, but like
to quote one of your tweets from like 6 years ago, like MFA voice, like I love how you juxtaposed like ad for a massive fashion brand in your poem. And so like MFA voice, like the reference to a boombox here made me think very much Clinton years, and so I was kind of disoriented from that, and I didn't think of your of this as an as MFA slop as you were
slop.
as you were implying, but like I agree that it is very much on second sight like something that could come from an academic setting, and there's some kitschiness to it that that was made me not very disposed to it. And I guess I guess in contrast to Eleanor, I would say that I thought that the other poem was a kitschier version of this.
Oh, you mean the Richard Blanco one?
Yeah, whereas, but now you labeling this MFA slop, I'm like, okay, I maybe I have to reevaluate my first read, because I'm definitely going by like first impressions, because aside from the fact that I don't want to reread these a bunch of times, but it's like, oh, if I was in an audience, you hear it once, I'm not gonna like reflect on these a lot.
I mean, you're absolutely right. At the heart of it, the Richard Blanco poem is way cheesier. But I've realized just now, like, what it is I don't really like about this poem is that it like kind of paints these poetic images, but the language it uses to do so is really boring. Like, it just doesn't interest me.
It's pretty sparse. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that I feel is very important to me in a poem, as the language.
Yeah, I don't. Okay, first of all, I didn't think it's an MFA slop, Marcus.
Like, I thought you were just like,
I wasn't like shitting on it.
Yeah, I thought you were holding back, and I just like pressed the button to be like, okay, we're gonna say MFA slop. Okay.
You're reading the subtext.
Yeah,
no, I was more just like thinking about it as like I don't know, like just formally, the poems before this aren't like the stanzas aren't regular, right? Like the Miller Williams poem, there's like 5 stanzas and they're all of different length. And Maya Angelou's poem has like all sorts of different length stanzas. And then we got this one, which rests so nicely on the page. It just feels like something that came out of a workshop. Like,
Yeah, I mean, the other poems, even if I didn't like them, it's like, this is the first poem that I felt like, okay, I've seen this before.
yes, yeah. I guess it feels a little anonymous or something, but like, again, we're hitting that like the tension of like trying to write for everybody. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's very difficult.
the New Republic had this pretty harsh criticism of her and said, the contemporary poet who set out to write an official occasional poem gives up the privacy in which modern poetry is born without gaining the authority and currency that used to be advantages of the poet laureate in Rome or England. Again, this reference to Rome, it comes up again and again. Her verse
Yeah,
is not
this
public but
motherfucker.
bureaucratic, that is to say, spoken by no one and addressed to no one. Alexander has reminded us of what Angelus, Williams, and even Robert Frost's inauguration poems already proved, that the poet's place is not on the platform but in the crowd, that she should speak not for the people but to them. Again, we're just hitting that same tension that we talked about, where it's like
This guy has some like, I read his whole fucking critique that you linked, and like, he does have some like good points that I agree with, but also he seems like a fucking dickhead.
I mean, the first line of this article is, there was inevitably something imperial about the inauguration today, the praetorian pomp, etc., etc.
He just keeps fucking talking about Rome. Shut the fuck up, dude.
Yeah, I don't.
No one
Yeah,
cares.
again, dude. Like, people think like whatever. We'll move on. Fifth inaugural poet.
We
Richard
don't
Plum.
have to. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail the whole fucking conversation.
No. I mean, I think we've said enough about that. Unless you have more.
Well, I do disagree with the speak not for the people but to them thing. I think that's fucking stupid. But
You think a poet can speak for the people?
I think she can speak for the people to the people.
Sure.
Like,
You're right.
Think you can do both.
Yeah, he's kind of setting up a false binary there, right?
Yeah,
false
I mean,
dichotomy.
obviously you can't literally speak for everyone else around you, but like,
Yeah.
you can address things that are not about, just you, but about the people.
Yeah. Can you speak for a pluralistic society? Can you give them voice? Or is the individual nature of the American project, like the prizing of the individual, does that kind of take away our ability to be spoken for as a people?
I think normally for poems, I think the job of a lot of poems is to speak for the people. But for an occasional poem like that, when you're up in front of a giant audience, it's like the expectation is you're speaking to the people. So you're supposed to have, this fucking nugget of wisdom or whatever to, portray forward to like commemorate the event and give it its fucking validity or whatever the fuck people want from it. So it's like, it's kind of clashing with the natural inclinations of a poem.
Yeah. I think you're right. I would like an inauguration poet to get up there and be like, here's my poem. I woke up today. I jacked off. I have diarrhea. Like, I made a Pop-Tart. Yeah,
my boyfriend broke up with me yesterday.
my boyfriend broke up with me yesterday. Like, I just watched like 4 hours of Orange is the New Black for some reason.
Jesus. This is getting really
okay,
grim.
but if you're gonna
Next.
speak to the American experience, like, isn't that it? Like, I fucking
it'd be
consume
like the
some
New
slop.
Girl, Girl, and listen to some boy.
I watched The
genius
Good
slop.
Doctor. I watched Law and Order SVU today.
That's kind of swag.
So next we have Obama's second inauguration. I don't even remember this one. Richard Blanco. He was the first gay poet to read, first Latino poet. I think he's the child of Cuban immigrants. And he read a poem called One Today.
One sun rose on us today, kindled over our shores, peeking over the Smokies, greeting the faces of the Great Lakes, spreading a simple truth across the Great Plains, then charging across the Rockies. One light, waking up rooftops, under each one a story, told by our silent gestures moving across windows.
This one's like a thick, dense poem. He's going all
It
over the
is,
place in this
yeah.
poem.
Goes into a lot of detail.
But he goes in now. He like references a lot of stuff in the way that really annoying Billy Joel song references a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it does. Like, honestly, it gets kind of obnoxious. But again, I think this lends itself to like the public's idea of an occasional poem.
As in just like wide net, baby. Wide fucking net.
It's so grandiose and fucking takes you on a journey or whatever.
Yeah,
and I feel like that's what what Elizabeth Alexander was trying to do, like, but just didn't do it quite as thoroughly as this.
Yeah,
because the MFA workshop shot it down.
Just whittled it down. Yeah, honestly, yeah. But there's some like phrases in here where I'm like, what? Like he talks about millions of faces crescendoing into our day, like weird turns of phrases.
Yeah, I mean, I am the last person to talk down on anyone for weird turns of phrases. But yeah, some of them work, I think, and some of them don't.
Yeah, gorgeous din of honking cabs. I kind of like that. There's like a conceit about one sky. It's like the kind of poem starts to like hinge on this conceit where like we're all under one sky, which is like, I don't know, a little sophomoric maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we have said, it's real fucking cheesy.
He does like bring in a lot of his like individual experience in here, but it's like it's kind of like balanced out with these like lists of things that he's working in there too.
Yeah,
so how much should he get paid to include Shalom?
Great cue. But he balanced that out with Namaste, you know?
I think it was the Namaste that made me just like being like, I guess I'll continue because I'm expected to continue. But after that, like, I can't.
Okay, but like, I just want to say, like, on a personal level, I found this guy kind of adorable. Like, I watched some like interviews with him. He's kind of like awkward and like a little neurotic. I don't know. There's something like appealing about him as a person. I know we're not really commenting on themselves, but like,
I believe it. That's kind of what this like speaks to, like his writing.
Yeah, it is a little neurotic of a poem. But if we're talking cheesy, we got to go with the most recent inaugural poet, Amanda Gorman, who a 22-year-old young woman, a sort of spoken word poet who read for Biden's inauguration in 2020. This
I am
one
not reading this.
I don't really want to read it. Marcus, do you
No, but gosh, and to refer back to our first episode, I can say in good faith again that it's giving hickory dickory dock.
Bruh.
Like, if we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all of the bridges we've made. That is the promise to glade. The hill we climb, if only we were daring it. Because
Wait, was that off the top of your head?
No, I had it
in
open.
the fucking poem.
Oh,
it's in the middle of it. But it was that
parodying it.
It was that
No, that's the
part.
poem.
It was that part where I was thinking of both Hickory Dickory Dock, Cat in the Hat, and also just like spoken word. Reality is not what you see, it's you and me. Yeah.
As I was reading this, I was thinking this would kill at a poetry slam.
This is it though. That's it. This is the poetry slam moment. Like, this is the moment where poetry slam and spoken word is like has overtaken the sort of public imagination of poetry and is now like, this is what people would think of when they think of a poem. The poem itself, I think there are versions where it's lineated, but the version I found is just like prose, and it definitely carries that sort of spoken word style, like Marcus pointed out. Here's a line from the Wikipedia article that I think just encapsulates what's going on here really well. The poem has several references to the musical Hamilton.
I don't know anything about that except from several layers removed. I don't even know what Hamilton's about. I assume Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah,
I don't want to find out.
Some of the context about this is interesting. So, like, first of all, there's a whole Wikipedia article about this poem. It's long, and the list of effusive praise for this poem is endless. They're calling it perfect. They're calling it a moment. They're calling it da 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 da. We have to remember though that this inauguration happened 2 weeks after January 6th, and before COVID, and after the defeat of the premature defeat of Donald Trump. And so I think if you look at the sort of media reaction to this poem, it is like insanely positive, and in a way that the other poets just did not have. And I think part of it is like, oh, here's this young woman poet, which great. But part of it is like the moment in time, like, I don't know. People were scared of January 6th, apparently. I just thought it was funny, but like...
Same.
It was just... the praise for this poem goes crazy. There's one criticism I found from the New Criterion, and the critic says... Gorman indulged in excruciating puns and game show host wordplay. We lay down our arms so that we can reach our arms out. The norms and notions of what just isn't always justice. Like, I don't want to. Okay,
Yeah,
I don't want to. She's a young poet. She's 22.
Yeah,
she's a young black woman. Like, I get it. I get it. But like, damn, this is not to my taste at all. And I like the idea of like Biden is trying to like out woke Obama, being like, oh, you had the first gay Latino poet? Well, I have a 22-year-old black woman poet. Fuck you. And then the next Democratic president is like, I've got a 14-year-old trans poet with like a peg leg, okay? And it's just it's like an arms race of identities, But I don't really know what to say about this poem. I don't want to like go fucking. I don't want to crash out right now, but like,
we've said it several times on this pod. We don't like slam poetry, but I feel like slam poetry is some of the most notorious poetry because, like, people get recorded and go viral or whatever. Hello, Merlin. And then, I feel like. A lot of people know about poetry either through slam poetry or, fucking Rupi Kaur.
Yeah. So the next poet, you're saying the next inaugural poet is going to be like Rupi Kaur, and get up there and read like 8 words.
I mean, sure, why not?
Yeah. You don't climb to a glade. That doesn't make any sense.
I mean, I guess. I think it's just literally just for the rhyme. But these rhymes are insufferable.
There's a 7th secret inauguration poet, actually, that I've discovered. Yes, we went through all 6 inauguration poets, but James Dickey read at Jimmy Carter's inauguration gala before Carter's inauguration. Now, this was a televised event full of comedy and full of several musicians. It looked like a really fun time. There are some clips of it on YouTube, but I could not find a clip of James Dickey reading this poem. So I don't think he really counts as an inaugural poet because he wasn't up on the dais. He wasn't reading to the people. But I do think it's an interesting. He's like the forgotten inaugural poet in some ways, and this poem is very interesting to me. I will just read the first little bit because I really like it. It's called The Strength of Fields. Moth force a small town always has, given the night. What field forms can be, outlining the small civic light decisions over a man walking near home. Men are not where he is exactly now, but they are around him like the strength of fields. The solar system floats on above him in town moths. Tell me, train sound, with all your long-lost grief, what I can give. Dear Lord of the Fields, what am I going to do? Streetlights, blue force and frail as the homes of men. Tell me how to do it, how to withdraw, how to penetrate and find the source of the power you always had, light as a moth and rising with the level and moonlit expansion of the fields around in the sleep of hoping men. You, I, what difference is there? We can all be saved by a secret blooming. Now as I walk the night and you walk with me, we know simplicity is close to the source that sleeping men search for in their home deep beds. I'm gonna stop there, but this is like the weirdest poem of all of them, right? Like,
this is the most interesting poem, yeah.
Yeah, it was a palate cleanse.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely the most daring one by far. It takes a lot of really artistic choices with the language and is not worrying about being like palatable for the masses at all.
Oh, this is a straight up like 1970s, like almost New York school style like poem. It's using all these weird hyphenations like moth force, field forms, light decisions, town moths, like strange images. This sort of singular image of this man. These like weird questions going through his head. It's so strange. I kind of wish it had been an inaugural poem.
Yeah, truly. This is better than almost all of the other ones except for Maya Angelou.
I got to agree with you. I think, he loses points for not being an actual inaugural poet. But whatever. I fuck with this poem heavily.
I mean, he is basically an inaugural poet, even if not officially.
Yeah. He's like the dark, occluded one,
Yeah.
Marcus, do you have any thoughts on this poem?
No, I agree. The language is interesting. I don't know enough about the New York school. Like whatever. There's always so much poems to read. I didn't. So I didn't make that association, but I did remark on all the hyphenation. I was actually into it, so I didn't know that was a thing. Like I associate hyphenating with like, I don't know, like internet posting or like translating into faux German or something.
Yeah.
But I like the hermetic
Yes.
turns of phrase and imagery.
Yeah, I want to clarify. I don't think this would qualify as like a New York school poet. Like those are more abstract generally, but like it's sort of gesturing in that direction, at least for me. And like the form is like it's busted up and like spread across the page in this really strange way.
Yeah, this is the only one with interesting line breaks too.
Oh yeah, the line breaks are crazy on this one, and even like weird caesuras in the middle of lines and stuff. Like there's just like it's so full of like vitality or something.
Yeah, definitely a nice change of pace.
If anyone can find a video of this being read, I'd really like to see it. I found somebody online who had clips of the gala uploaded, but he didn't have this and he didn't respond to my email. So let's do a quick tier listing here. So I'm feeling like we're putting Maya Angelou at S tier, perhaps.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Where are we putting Robert Frost?
Mid
tier, B tier.
I put him at B.
Yeah, I agree with that. What about Elizabeth? What's her name? I'm sorry, I already forgot it.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Alexander.
Yes.
MFA poem. Where are we putting that?
C. I say C.
C.
C tier. Okay. Miller Williams. Where we put?
D.
Yeah.
Sorry, Miller.
I think we all kind of agree on this. Richard Blanco.
I put
Whatever's
him A.
below D. I put whatever's below D.
I put him A, surprisingly.
Damn. Okay. We got some disagreement on that one.
I feel like his poem does fairly well as an occasional poem, so I would put him A.
That's okay. We can disagree. We're not one unit. What about Amanda Gorman?
C.
C tier. Okay.
Yeah, see.
And then James Dickey, where are we putting him?
Oh, he failed at the assignment, so I guess A.
Yeah. Like I feel like I can't put him at S tier because it's like
anyone could have put any poem. Like, if his poem is the metric of like an occasional poem, you can use anything.
I mean, without Maya Angelou, he would be S. But
yeah.
She just fucking knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. So we have S tier Maya Angelou, A tier James Dickey, and maybe Richard Blanco. B tier Robert Frost coming in at B. We got C. We got Elizabeth Alexander and Amanda Gorman. And then D, pulling up the rear, Miller Williams with a single vote for Richard Blanco down there as well. Rhetorical question. Do you guys think Trump is going to have an inaugural poet?
I very highly doubt it.
Absolutely fucking not.
I know who would like be an awesome inaugural poet for Trump.
I want to hear.
For a Trump 2.0, second round of Orange Man. David Porter.
Our boy, David Porter. Just reads like a fucked up poem about a murder or something. Yeah, I would like that. Trump is definitely not going to have an inaugural poet. Just quickly run through, and we're running out of time here. But I want to run through a couple of the people who want to be Trump's inaugural poets, and then my idea for Trump's inaugural poet. So there was this notorious poet named Joseph Massey. And his story kind of starts in 2018. An anonymous blog post popped up online describing his verbal and psychological abuse, including severe name-calling, bullying, and unrelenting verbal abuse, blaming victims for symptoms of what he considers his mental illness and using depression/anxiety as an excuse for predation. This is all alleged, of course, but this popped up online. Now, Joseph Massey, was a poet of some note. He actually published on Wave Poetry. And these allegations came forward, and he was essentially canceled and ostracized from the poetry world. He kind of went on this little apology tour on a few media sources and then disappeared for a while, but surprise, he came back and he's a Catholic now. He got so canceled that he became Christian. There's something really fucking classic about that. Like, it's so funny to be like, actually, I'm Catholic now. And Jesus forgives me, so you should all forgive me too. And if you don't, you're a demon. Like, that's the subtext to this, right? So it kind of comes back in 2021, and his sort of tone about all of this has changed. And I think it kind of points to the way cancellation has changed. We all know it doesn't really happen or doesn't really work or whatever. But he kind of comes back and is like, I was wrongly canceled. And he kind of has this right-wing turn. He becomes a Christian. He becomes a Trump guy. And it's been lucrative for him. He made an appearance on, for example, the Megyn Kelly show. Did you guys watch that YouTube video?
No.
No, I did not.
You really should at least click it because he's interviewed about being canceled on the Megyn Kelly show and about being a poet.
Does he have like a crucifix in the background or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, I did watch some of it. I could only take like 3 minutes of it.
It is mind-numbing. It is awful, right? And the funny thing about this video is like his face is so airbrushed. He's like using a filter or something. He looks like the fucking Gerber baby with like a beard of Instagram filter on. I swear
I
to
just thought
God.
he had makeup on because like I guess lots of people like I don't know. I guess if they film themselves, like wear makeup. If there's, like,
it could be makeup. My guy is looking like a porcelain doll. Okay, he's looking fucking dewy. It looks weird. I think people should look this up. But this Megyn Kelly interview is kind of interesting because she's like, "You were canceled," and he was like, "Yeah, I was canceled," and he was like, they said I called a woman hot at a poetry reading. Can you believe it? And it's like, okay, you're a little bit burying the lead here. You're kind of that's not the main reason.
There were other things.
There's other things, right? But he's just become like this guy who's like, I'm the right-wing poet, and so he has sort of this delusional campaign that he's mounted over the past few months to become Trump's inaugural poet. And as far as campaign, all I can really tell is he's sending emails and sending tweets and like tagging Megyn Kelly. So he kept this up for a few weeks, kind of hinting like, ooh, I got an interesting email. At some point a couple weeks ago, he was like, I think there's a 50% chance I'll be Trump's inaugural poet, which is like, how do you arrive at that number? Is it 50% because it's just a yes or a no? Like, I don't understand what he was saying there. But in the past few days, he said it's not going to happen. And this campaign has ended. I think he probably has found an audience being the right-wing poet, because I kind of assume that like the bench isn't very deep on the right-wing poetry side of things, so they're happy to have one, right? It's not even that interesting of a story. Like, he just got canceled, and now he's like goes and does these boring interviews where he talks about how bad cancel culture is. And if there's one thing I just cannot fucking stand and I find so boring, it is talking about cancel culture. Like, it is like, what? There's nothing insightful to say about this anymore.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
It's like
on any angle someone takes from it, it's mind-numbing.
But he has since given up his campaign to become Trump's inaugural poet. It's a sad affair if you look at his tweets. He's just like, I hope it happens. And he's like, poetry is not just for the left. And it's like, well, you're not really making a strong case in the other direction, man. But he did post the poem he wrote for Inauguration. He posted it yesterday. And it's paired with this video that I can only describe as, do you remember after COVID when all these brands were doing these like commercials where it was like really sad, somber piano music, and it was like families hugging each other, and it was like, General Motors knows that you miss your family, but we'll get through this together. It's like Walmart is here for you when you need, it's like this very somber, serious tone. That's what his video reminds me of. The poem is very uninteresting. It starts with this conceit that America is a poem, and then it abandons the conceit about a third of the way in. And this also takes me back to 2016, and I think I'm the only person in the world who remembers this, because everyone I've brought this up to does not remember it. But when Trump was elected in 2016, this poet came forward and said, I am the unofficial Trump inaugural poet. And it comes from an American poet named Joseph Charles Mackenzie of the Society of Classical Poets. And it talks about Trump's Scottish roots. I will read my favorite part from this poem, which is pretty long. But here's my favorite part. For all his great wisdom, the braw gallant man is matched by his children, the handsome Trump clan. And the flower of Europe, Melania the fair, adds a luster and grace with her long flowing hair. Did a sixth grader write this poem?
It just feels like it feels like someone from like fucking 814 BC Scotland time traveled to the future and then gave us a poem about Donald Trump.
And so he comes from this thing called the Society of Classical Poets. And I will just tell you all you need to know about it. You go to their website. It's very clearly a WordPress. You go to their About Me, and there's a video, and it says, what happened to good poetry? And the image is a rainbow flag with a swastika and a hammer and sickle on it, and Walt Whitman in the middle. I kid you not.
Yeah, I was actually familiar with this organization beforehand, which
Why?
is crazy. Because in academic work, I'll keep this very brief. And doing some research, I was looking through if a certain like early 20th century nationalist French poet had ever been translated into English,
and someone in one of their like print collections had done a translation, and I never got my hands on it, but I was aware of this organization beforehand. And so when I clicked the link, I went, oh wow, okay, I remember visiting this site and like acquainting myself with it. Some of their stuff is like more, I would say, like it's better at what they're trying to do. So I believe that there are instances, I think, of some of their publications that aren't just like as abysmal as this example. But I mean, this one you selected, or that was the Trump poem, is just an example of like how easy it is to fail, and like makes you wonder, like, should people even be attempting it if the failure results in this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like, again, I don't think their bench is very deep. I think they take whoever they can get in a way.
Yeah.
And like, it's good that they're doing like some good. I have nothing wrong with classical poetry. You know, they all have this chip on their shoulder about how people have abandoned form and meter, and it's like,
yeah,
it just doesn't seem true to me. Like, every poet I know contends with questions of classical forms and works with them in interesting ways, sometimes in traditional ways and sometimes in experimental ways. But it's like, do they really want all poetry to be like this? I just don't understand. Like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like those kind of people just don't like that any other form of poetry is like in the mainstream.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. It's like, poetry can be a lot of things, bro.
And I will also say, not to be total poetry nerd here, but like, so this Trump poem, he's kind of working in iambic, sort of, it's an Alexandrian line. It's a 12 syllable line, and iambic hexameter, I believe. But I gotta say, I don't wanna, step on the Society of Classical Poets' toes too much here. But like, if you are gonna be that, you got to be a bit more careful with the iams, man. I'm just saying, this poem has got a lot of anapests sneaking through the gate. I don't know. If you are a Society of Classical Poets, you should be really good at writing iams, and this poem is not rigidly iambic. It seems kind of like he's inventing his own form. He goes between iams and anapests. He's working with his own kind of form here. So I gotta say, C. I gotta give him a C on writing a classical poem. He's not very good at it.
Yeah, but it is based on a formal traditionalist form of poetry from Scotland, which means something to them, I guess.
I was trying to figure that out, and it seems like it's trying to be the Alexandrian line, or maybe just iambic hexameter, but his meter is not regular enough. Like, he is like all over the place metrically, and he's forcing the meter in a lot of moments. I gotta say, I think I could do a better job. I should be the one to write this poem.
Yeah, you definitely could.
But we're getting to the end here. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to read what I think should be Trump's inaugural poem. And, I was thinking about this. Who could actually be the one to represent this moment in our history and our culture, and who could be the one to speak for this new administration and speak for Americans in general? And there's only one poet that really comes to mind, and that is, we're going back to Rome once more, the late Roman poet Catullus.
Yes.
Catullus is well known as being one of the number one shit talkers in all of poetry history. He's sort of nasty. He's clever. And I got to say, sometimes Trump is clever. And I think an AI hologram of Catullus reading at the inauguration would capture the vibe so much better than any living poet could. So I picked a poem by Catullus called Disgusting. And I picked this poem because there's a Trump tweet from 2011 where he says, Barney Frank of the House Fiduciary Committee, Barney Frank looked disgusting, nipples protruding, in his blue shirt before Congress. Very, very disrespectful. So to close this out, I'd like to read this short Catullus poem. Just imagine a shimmering hologram on the dais of Catullus. And he's saying this. He says, I did not, may the gods love me, think it mattered, whether I might be smelling Emilius's mouth or ass. The one's no cleaner, the other's no dirtier. In fact, his ass is both cleaner and nicer, since it's no teeth. Indeed, the other has foot-long teeth, gums like an old box cart, and jaws that usually gape like the open cunt of a pissing mule in heat. He fucks lots of women and makes himself out to be charming and isn't set to the mill with the ass. Shouldn't we think of any girl touching him, she's capable of licking a foul hangman's ass. So, does that capture the moment? Is that the American populace? Is that the mood of this country? I think so.
I feel like that speaks to Donald Trump, yes. Yeah, I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
I think it should be riffraff.
Wow, I would really like that, actually. Remember that one song where he's like, presidential tent, Michelle Obama, 40 freezers in the freezer, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Presidential tent, Michelle Obama, frozen famous in the freezer, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Wow, we've all picked one. David Porter, Riff Raff, or AI Catullus. Well, that's the episode. That's all of the inauguration poets. We ranked them. We talked about the future. The not fit for composition will reign for 100 years. Yeah, anything else left to say, guys?
No, not really. Chelsey Minnis, if you think of any predictions, please let us know.
I love you guys so much. I think we're entering into a horrible era of the United States, but at least we have a cool podcast. And yeah, that's all I got. I don't fucking know how to end this one.
Okay. We have each other.
And we have each other! Oh! Yeah!